Welcome to the Facilitators Deep Dive Podcast, your podcast on your way to facilitation mastery. Today we're going to be looking at a really interesting book. I think it's called Das Inner Archive by Vera F. Birkenbihl. And it's all about kind of unlocking the power of your memory, but it's more than just memory techniques, right?
Yeah, it's really fascinating how she goes beyond just the sort of like rote memorization techniques and really gets into like maximizing your thinking power, like your actual intelligence.
Yeah.
You know?
And it's interesting because she talks about this concept of like an inner archive that we all have that's just this like treasure trove of knowledge and experiences, but that we often struggle to actually access.
Yeah, and she cites some really interesting brain research. Did you know that there were experiments done in like the 70s and 80s that already demonstrated that our brains are wired for associative thinking? And it's not just about remembering facts, you know? It's about applying that same type of thinking to spark new ideas and solutions.
Yeah.
You know?
It's so interesting, too, how she talks about, I think she calls it sunken knowledge.
Right.
Where it's almost like...
Yeah, like it's all sunk to the bottom of a lake. It's there.
Yeah.
But you need the right tools to like dredge it back up.
Yeah.
And that's where the associative thinking comes in.
And one of the things that she recommends, which I think is like surprisingly simple, is the ABC list.
Yeah.
Have you ever done ABC lists?
Well, yeah, I love ABC lists. It's amazing.
It's so...
You know, you start off and you're like, okay, I'm going to do an ABC list of animals. And you start with the obvious ones, like ape, bear, cat.
Right.
But then as you get down, you're like, wait a minute. I know there are more animals than this.
Yeah,
and like you start digging deeper and suddenly you're coming up with like nudibranchs and quolls and xenopus, you know? And it's like, whoa, where did that come from? Like,
it's like this.
You have all this knowledge you didn't even realize you had access to.
It's like this hidden, it's like, it's not even just about what, you know, it's about how quickly you can access it.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think it's interesting because she brings up this paradox where like, people crave simple solutions, but then they dismiss them because they're so simple.
Right, totally. It's like maybe we need to give the simple stuff a chance sometimes, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Like before we just write it off.
Yeah, try it before you knock it, right?
Exactly.
So beyond the ABC list, she also talks about like some other kind of intriguing methods like the KaWas technique.
Right.
Have you ever tried that one?
I haven't actually tried it, but the concept is really interesting. You know?
Yeah.
Like you write about something for a certain amount of time and then you seal it away.
Right.
And like weeks or months later, you come back and you look at it.
And analyze it.
Yeah. And it's almost like this team of archivists in your mind has been working on it in the background and unearthed all these like deeper connections, you know, while you were off doing other things.
And then there's LULL's ladder.
LULL's ladder.
Which I had never even heard of.
Yeah.
But it's this like...
It's so cool.
Centuries-old technique for connecting concepts from two different lists to kind of generate new ideas.
Like, I mean, think about it. People have been using list-based thinking for centuries to like break through creative blocks and stuff. It's so cool. And she has a great example in the book where she connects like the quote-unquote universals with divine attributes. It's like this illustration of how you can take this like centuries old list and use it to generate new insights.
Yeah. It's amazing how these seemingly simple techniques can tap into like such deep wells of knowledge.
Right.
But, you know, she doesn't stop there. She also talks about how our perceptions shape how we understand the world.
It's so true. Like she has this great example about the three men climbing the same mountain.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
The architect,
the
painter.
The architect, the painter, and the philanderer.
And the philanderer.
And they each perceive the mountain totally differently.
Right.
Based on their profession and their, you know, proclivities.
Well, it makes you wonder then if our perceptions are so subjective.
Yeah.
How do we ensure that we're not learning a distorted version of reality?
That's a great question. And I think that's where she brings in the whole idea of mindful learning.
Right.
Like really challenging our assumptions and looking for different perspectives, you know? It's not just about passively absorbing information.
Yeah.
It's about actively engaging with it and thinking critically about it.
And she talks about Ellen Langer's research, who I'm a big fan of.
Oh, yeah, me too.
But
she's amazing.
You know, really kind of going beyond that rote memorization.
Right. It's not real learning, you know, if you're just memorizing facts.
And one of the things she talks about, which I thought was so fascinating, is that experiment with the baseball players.
Oh, yeah.
Where
that's a great one.
They found that flexible instructions actually led to better performance.
Yeah, especially for the women.
Yeah.
Especially for the women. It's like if women thrive in learning environments that are less authoritarian,
right,
maybe we should rethink our whole approach to like drill and kill,
yeah,
across the board.
Exactly. So we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
But there is a flip side to memory that she talks about that I think is a little bit uncomfortable.
Right.
Which is this concept of source amnesia.
Source amnesia.
Which is where we forget where we learned something.
Right.
And
pretty scary, actually.
It is kind of scary. And she gives that example in the book of that Australian psychiatrist who was falsely accused by a witness who was struggling with source amnesia.
It's like our memories aren't as reliable as we think they are.
Right. Bro. And then on top of that, there's also the quote-unquote wallpaper effect.
Yeah. Wallpaper effect.
Which is this idea that like the context of the situation heavily influences what we remember.
Yeah.
Do you remember that story she tells about Alex and the cigarettes?
Oh, yeah.
Where he thought he was bumming a cigarette from a pack on the table, but they were his own cigarettes.
Right.
He was just so used to being in that environment where everyone was sharing cigarettes.
Right. Like the context just completely distorted his memory.
Right.
You know?
So if our memories are so susceptible to distortion,
right,
how do we even protect ourselves from misinformation and false memories?
That is the question. I think one of the things she emphasizes is just being aware of it.
Yeah,
you know, like just knowing that source amnesia exists can make us more critical consumers of information.
Right.
You know?
And then also like don't underestimate the power of those like simple tools like the ABC list and LULL's ladder because they can actually help us connect information.
Yeah, like make it stick.
Make it stick.
Make those memories more robust.
Right.
You know?
So it's really about being active participants in our own learning, not just passive recipients of information.
Right. It's about like taking ownership of your learning.
Yeah.
You know?
So what stands out to you from everything that we've talked about so far?
I think what's so striking to me is how much potential we all have locked away inside, you know? Like, we just need to find the right keys to unlock it. And
it seems like Birkenbill's giving us a whole key ring.
She is. She is. Like,
and they're not just techniques for geniuses.
No.
It's stuff that anyone can use to really sharpen their mental agility.
It's like exercising our brains.
Yeah.
Just like we would our bodies.
Right.
We need to be intentional about building that mental strength.
Exactly. And stay tuned, because in the next part of our deep dive, we're going to explore Birkenbill's insights into learning styles.
Oh, yeah.
The impact of emotions on learning.
Can't wait.
And the importance of creating a positive learning environment.
It's going to be good.
So stick with us.
Yeah. So as we continue exploring this idea of the inner archive, one thing that really jumps out to me is the importance of like understanding our own learning styles.
Right.
Right.
Like, are we visual learners? Are we auditory learners?
Right.
Are we kinesthetic learners? Like, what is it that actually helps us learn best?
And, you know, it makes you wonder, like, are the methods that we're using actually the most effective?
Right.
You know, maybe we're just kind of stuck in a rut doing things the way we've always done them.
Right.
But Birkenbihl doesn't really try to, like, categorize learners. You know, she doesn't say you're this type or that type.
Right.
But she emphasizes that there's no one-size-fits-all approach. And she even suggests that, like, the way we prefer to learn might not always be the most effective way.
Oh, that's interesting.
You know?
So, like, sticking to what's comfortable could actually be holding us back.
Totally. Like, she gives this interesting example of musicians who find that learning a new instrument actually helps them improve their mastery of their primary instrument.
It's like cross-training for your brain.
Exactly. It's like you're forcing yourself to see the familiar from a new perspective.
Yeah, and speaking of new perspectives, Birkenbihl really challenges the idea that learning should be purely rational.
Right. Like, why are we so afraid of emotions?
Right. Like, why are we trying to, like, shut them out of the learning process?
It's so weird because, like, she argues that emotions are actually integral to learning and remembering.
Right.
Like, our brains are wired to prioritize information that has an emotional charge.
Think about it. We all remember stories that made us laugh or cry.
Way more than
a lick the facts.
Right. It's like our brains are saying, hey, pay attention to this. This is important.
And so she actually encourages learners to embrace the emotional aspects of learning.
Right.
Even suggesting techniques like humor and storytelling to make information more memorable.
It's like making it stick.
Yeah, make it stick.
Yeah.
And this actually kind of leads us into another really important theme in the book, which is creating a positive learning environment.
Yes.
Because, I mean, who learns well when they're feeling stressed and pressured?
Nobody.
Right? It's like your brain just shuts down.
Yeah, it's like fight or flight mode kicks in and learning goes out the window.
Right? And so she talks about the importance of feeling safe, supported,
right,
and free to explore new ideas without fear of judgment.
Like, imagine a learning environment where you felt totally comfortable to, like, make mistakes and ask questions.
Right.
And just play around with ideas.
Playfulness.
Playfulness. Is that what you're saying? Yeah, like bringing that sense of playfulness into the learning process.
So are you talking about, like, incorporating games and activities?
That's part of it. But it's also about, like, approaching learning with a sense of curiosity and wonder. Like, giving yourself permission to experiment and make mistakes without feeling like you failed.
It's like giving your inner child permission to come out and play.
I love that. It's like letting your inner child play in the sandbox of knowledge.
Right. And that can actually enhance our creativity and problem-solving abilities.
Totally.
So we've got playfulness.
Okay.
But where does structure fit into all of this?
Right. Because you don't want it to be complete chaos.
Right. Like, doesn't too much freedom become chaotic?
I think she sees it as, like, structure provides the framework, and then playfulness lets us color outside the lines.
So it's not about stifling creativity.
No.
It's about providing an environment where it can thrive.
Exactly.
So what would that look like in practice?
Well, I think structure can come from things like having clear learning objectives, setting time limits, getting regular feedback. It's about creating that sense of safety and predictability that allows you to actually take risks and push boundaries.
Right. It's like you know where the boundaries are, so you feel comfortable kind of pushing against them.
Yeah.
So what's becoming really clear here is that all of these elements are interconnected.
Right. It's not just about, like, isolated techniques.
Right.
It's about creating a holistic learning experience
that engages our whole selves.
Our minds, our emotions, our bodies.
Right.
Even the environments we learn in.
And she talks about this concept of flow.
Oh, yeah. Flow state.
Right.
That's like the holy grail of learning.
Where you're just totally absorbed and time just kind of melts away.
It's like effortless concentration.
Right.
You're just completely in the zone.
And when we find flow in our learning, it's like we unlock our full potential.
Totally. And we actually achieve true mastery.
Right. It's not just about, like, filling our minds with information.
No.
It's about becoming lifelong learners.
Right.
Who are constantly growing and evolving.
And that's a journey we can all embark on.
Right.
No matter where we're starting from.
So much to think about.
Yeah.
And there's still more to come.
Oh, yeah.
In the final part of our deep dive, we're going to explore Birkenbill's insights into the power of metaphors, the importance of repetition, and how to overcome those inevitable learning obstacles that we all face.
Sounds good.
So stick with us. All right, we are back for the final part of our deep dive into Das innere Archiv. And we've covered so much ground already. But there are a couple more, like, real gems, I think, that Birkenbihl shares that I want to make sure we unpack.
Yeah.
And one of them is the power of metaphors.
Metaphors.
Like, I know we use metaphors all the time in language.
Right.
But, like, how do they actually help us learn?
Well, think about it this way.
Okay.
Metaphors, they connect new concepts to something we already understand.
Right.
So it makes the unfamiliar feel more accessible.
So, like, when we talk about, like, grasping an idea,
exactly,
we're using a physical action to represent, like, a mental process.
Yeah. Yeah. And Birkenbihl encourages us to not just, like, passively recognize metaphors, but to actively use them.
Okay.
You know, she even gives examples of how metaphors have been used throughout history to explain complex scientific concepts in a way that makes them easier to grasp.
It's like building a bridge between the known and the unknown.
Exactly.
And then, you know, even just thinking about the metaphors we use in everyday life.
Right. Like stuck in a rut.
Stuck in a rut.
Drowning in debt.
Drowning in debt. Like, they actually shape our perception of the problem.
They do.
Yeah.
And so Birkenbill's point is that we can actually use this to our advantage.
Okay.
By consciously choosing metaphors that empower us rather than limit us.
So I love that. Okay, so we've got metaphors.
Okay.
What else is in Birkenbill's kind of learning toolkit that she recommends?
Well, this one might surprise you.
Okay.
Repetition.
Repetition.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that a little bit like old-fashioned?
I know it sounds counterintuitive,
Right.
especially in our world today where it's all about novelty and like the next new thing.
Right.
But she makes a really strong case for it.
Okay.
You know, when done right, repetition is actually essential for moving information from short-term to long-term memory.
So how do we do it right?
Yeah.
How do we make sure we're not just like mindlessly repeating things?
Well, it's about spacing out the repetition over time and varying the context in which we encounter the information.
So give me an example.
Sure. So let's say you're learning a new language. You could review vocabulary words while you're walking, while you're cooking, while you're listening to music.
Right.
You know, keep your brain engaged and keep it fresh.
It makes you wonder if there's like an optimal interval for revisiting information.
Well, there actually is. There's a scientific term for it. It's called the spacing effect.
Spacing effect.
Yeah. And research shows that we're more likely to remember something if we encounter it multiple times with spaces in between.
So it's not just about like cramming.
No, cramming doesn't work. It's about like strategically spacing out your learning.
But what about those times when we just hit a wall? You know?
Oh, yeah.
We feel stuck.
Totally.
We feel frustrated.
It happens to all of us. Like learning obstacles are inevitable.
So what do we do?
Well, she offers some strategies.
Okay, let's hear them. How do we get unstuck?
Well, one approach is to just shift your perspective. You know, sometimes we get so fixated on one approach that we fail to see other possibilities. So she encourages us to step back, ask new questions, and consider alternative viewpoints.
It's like looking at a puzzle from a different angle.
Exactly.
Sometimes you just need to like...
turn it upside down.
Turn it upside down.
Yeah, up a little bit.
Shake it up. And then I also think sometimes we just need to like ask for help.
Oh, yeah, totally.
You know?
There's no shame in admitting that you don't know something or that you're struggling.
Yeah. Right. And sometimes like a fresh perspective or just a different explanation can really help us clear those mental roadblocks.
Absolutely. And don't forget about self-care.
Right.
You know, learning requires energy and focus.
Yeah.
So make sure you're getting enough rest, eating well, managing your stress.
You can't expect your brain to perform at its best if you're running on empty.
Exactly.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive into Dust Inner Archive, what are some of the like key takeaways that our listeners should keep in mind?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that learning isn't just about accumulating knowledge. It's about expanding your capacity to think, to create, and to solve problems.
It's about becoming like a more engaged and empowered learner.
Exactly.
And it seems like Birkenbihl gives us the tools to do just that.
She does.
You know, from associative thinking and ABC lists to metaphors and mindful learning.
Right.
It's about taking an active role in shaping your own mind.
I love that. It's been so fun exploring these ideas with you.
Yeah, me too. And remember, this is just the beginning. Learning is a lifelong adventure.
It is.
So here's a final thought for you.
Okay.
If something as simple as an ABC list can unlock so much hidden knowledge, what other treasures are waiting to be discovered within your own inner archive?
Happy exploring.
See you next time on the Facilitators Deep Dive Podcast, your podcast on your way to facilitation mastery. Until next time.
See you then.